1872 Cavite Mutiny. In 1872, there are two major events that happened in that year. The first one is the 1872 Cavite Mutiny, and the second one is the martyrdom of the three priests in the person of Fathers Mariano Gomez, Jose Burgos, and Jacinto Zamora. They call us Gomborsa Fathers. The 1872 Mutiny is the most important event in the Philippine history, and according to others, without the 1872 Cavite Mutiny, there will be no 1896 Philippine Revolution. So hi, my name is Claudian C. Daes. I am a BSBA Marketing Management student, and for today's session, I am your first reporter. So what is mutiny? Mutiny is a rebellion against authority, like when a sailors overthrow the captain of the ship, or when a class of 8th grader refused to dissect a frog in biology class. Another definition is it's a revolt among a group of people who want to oppose or overthrow a specific association or organization, and usually mga soldiers ang mga namumuno nito. Mutiny comes from old verb mutin, which means revolt, and mutiny is still like a revolt. But what is Cavite Mutiny? When we call Cavite Mutiny, it means what happened in Cavite in the year 1872. So what happened in Cavite Mutiny? Brief uprising of 200 Filipino troops and workers at the Cavite Arsenal, which became the excuse for Spanish repression of the embryonic Philippine nationalist movement. So there are 200 Filipino troops and workers at the Cavite Arsenal ang nagsama-sama na nagbabasakaling makatulong ito sa kanilang adhikain, ngunit sa kasamaang palad, hindi na isa katuparan ng pagkaklas at napatay ang nakaisa dito. Also, there are two versions or perspective of Cavite Mutiny, which is the Filipino version and the Spanish version, na tatalakayan ng aking mga kagrupo. So next is, me and my group mate will going to discuss the Cavite Mutiny 5 unknown earlier trials 1872, Leandro Tormosa. So Jose Protasio Rizal Mercado y Alonso Yolanda, in short Jose Rizal. We all know that Jose Rizal is identified as a hero of revolution for his writings that center on ending colonialism and liberating Filipino minds to contribute to creating the Filipino nation. One of the novels that Jose Rizal wrote is Noli Me Tangere, whose centenary we are celebrating a factious narrative of the cause and effects of the Cavite Mutiny that happened on the 9th of January 20, 1872. The second novel that Jose Rizal wrote is El Filibusterismo. What is the reason why Jose Rizal wrote the El Filibusterismo? One of the reasons is when the Gomborsa Fathers were executed by garroting in the public to serve as a threat to Filipino never to attempt to fight the Spaniards again. That is a scene purportedly witnessed by a young Jose Rizal. Yun yung nag-udyok ng Rizal upang isulat o inimbag ang pangalawang nobela na El Filibusterismo noong September 18, 1891. Also, Jose Rizal wrote the Noli Me Tangere, Touching Not, and El Filibusterismo, the Filibuster, for an overriding reason to let the world know about how his motherland endured the behavior of the Spanish friars, officials, and their supporters in the Philippines, especially in the 19th century. The initial disposition of the Cavite Mutiny. Contemporary documents reveal that on the night between 20 and 21st of January 1872, the head of the superior civil government was appraised at 3 o'clock before dawn, the 21st of the uprising in Cavite. So General Rafael Esquidor dispatched General Felipe Hinoves Espinar o Segundo Cabo to suppress the sedition without mercy of regard, disseminating the insurgents he could capture and with the advice of the auditor war. So General Rafael Esquidor was a Spanish military officer, politician, and statesman. He served as the governor of the Philippines from April 4, 1871 to January 8, 1873. The number of insurgents in the Cavite Mutiny. On January 21st, 1872, 11 o'clock in the morning, through telegram, Genoves reported to Esquidor that the insurgents were 200. 200 serve as the source of historical population, 21 insurgents estimated dead, and 8 taken to prison. January 22, 1872, 34 insurgents were put to sword, diary operations, 40 insurgents being taken to prison. On 31st of January, Esquidor reported as follows. In Short San Felipe, the orderly detachment which rebelled was composed of a lieutenant, 2 sergeants, a bugler, and 32 soldiers. All soldiers of the Marine Infantry who mutinied in their barracks number 54, 15 remained without a passing on fort, and these were sent to the barracks of the Infantry Regiment number 7. The Marine Infantry Guard stationed at the exterior gate of the arsenal, which also sided with the enemy, was composed of about 7 troops.
Arsenal is a place where arms and ammunition are made, maintained, and repaired, stored, or issued in any combination, whether privately or publicly owned. So, ang arsenal, kay buhatanan siya sa mga gamit sa mga Espanyol like bala, pusil, granada, and anything that used in war. Only Filipino people who work there, but not the work that we used to think na after work na tayo sweldo ma-receive, but sila wala maskin piso. Way back then, or should I say in 1872, if you are a Filipino then you work in Arsenal, you're automatically exempted from polo y servicio. Working in Arsenal was their way to be free from forced labor. Polo y servicio is a forced labor for those people, Filipino people who are not working in Arsenal or paying a fala. So, bisan dili ka ganahan mo work but you don't have a choice kay mao man na ilang rules and you should follow it if you don't want to start a fight with Spaniards. So, ang fala, ang tawag nila sa buwis na ginabayaran sa mga Filipino workers na naay trabaho or naka-earn og enough money. So, bayad sila para dili sila ma-appeal sa polo y servicio or trabaho sa arsenal. The first 2 trials, 2 war councils were both headed by Colonel Francisco Moscoso y Lara. The prisoners headed by Tolentino were tried by Fiscal Juan Gomez E. Fernandez of the Royal Infantry Regiment No. 1, and the following captains of the same regiment acted as judges: Fernando Gonzalez, Fidelio Novella, Francisco Salado, Jose Perez, Francisco Sanchez, and Fidel Hernandez. Sad to say, there were 9 of them condemned to death. They were Tolentino, 6 soldiers, a first and second corporal. 22 soldiers were indicted to 10 years imprisonment, and the 3 remaining soldiers were not guilty. How comes na ang uban kay na-acquitted but naay gi-condemn to death? Kay tungod lagi ilang pamalakad atong panahona kay naay bias og injustice jud kaayo siya. On the other side, the group of Manonson was adjudicated by Lieutenant Emilio Gonzalez y Grano de Oro of the Queen's Regiment No. 2. The following captains were the judges: Enrique Tovar, Fernando Gonzalez, Victor Sanchez, Federico Novella, Antonio Bustillo, and Fidel Hernandez. Naay ubang judges na na-mention diri kay same ra sa acted judges sa first trials. So remember their names kay mauna sila usa sa mga tao na naghatag og injustice sa mga Filipino people atong year 1872. 34 accused soldiers were convicted to death, while a crewman, a prisoner, and a civilian named Maximo Inocencio were set aside for later questioning. 22 soldiers of the Marine Infantry received an exemption. Unta pariha nila na ay special treatment na ay na-receive na indult or privilege na di sila ma-appeal sa trial. The 8 who tried to skip escaped from Fort San Felipe, and the 4 of the Marine Infantry, including Manonson, were executed by firing squad. A firing squad is a group of soldiers detailed to shoot a condemned personal group of soldiers. Same way if giunsap pagpatay si Jose Rizal through firing squad. The third and fourth trials. The third trial convicted First Corporal Rafael Calda and 11 more of the artillery regiment guarding Manila for the crime of conspiracy and antecedent knowledge of the insurrection attempted in Cavite. 4 of them were first corporals, 5 second corporals, and 32 artillerymen. This case was prepared by the Deputy Commander of the Queen's Infantry Regiment No. 2, which was Manuel Boscasa E. Perez. The head judge was again Colonel Moscoso E. Lara, with the following associate judges: Narciso Claveria, Ramon Arce, Victor Sanchez, Francisco Salado, Jose Perez, and Pedro Garcia. 11 were condemned to death. The one reported the conspiracy to a sergeant was sentenced to 10 years maskin nisumbong siya sa conspiracy, wag yapon siya na save from being put in jail. Pero okay ra iyang jurisdiction kay wa man siya na condemned to death like other insurgents. On February 12, Izquierdo ordered that the sentence of Rafael Calda and Cleto Yance, death convicts but pardon, be carried out in one of the garrisons in Africa, communicated to the Overseas Ministry 12 days later. This decision was based on Cleto Yance's having boasted that in the garrison he would provoke new conflicts. These words from the official letter number 442 make one pause. The 2 of them carry out another type of false boasting with regard to them being part in the mutiny. We know from Corporal Tolentino's declarations cited in those passages of the acts of the trial of Father Burgos and copied by Artagas y Corva that he met of Palacio Street Corporal Calda, Yancy, and Corteza, who mentioned the native pastor of San Pedro as president. Because of this statement, napasanginlan si Father Burgos sa buhat na wala niya gihimo or wala niya gibuhat. Mao ni one of the reason nganong nagaruti ang Gamborza Fathers because of false accusations. The 5th trials of this trial, a copy of which Artagas y Cuerva had and was being kept in the Philippines National Library in 1910, we only know what this author published in his Successos de 1872 and the sentence according to which Burgos, Gomez, Zamora, and Zaldua were condemned to death and executed as instigators and accomplices of the revolution. Even though walay strong evidence ang government to prove their conspiracy, nadayon gihapon ang pagaruti sa ila sa tubangan sa daghang tawo. Kay during that time, ang sakto ra jud ang mga Spaniards. Imong point of view dapat ginakip para na nimo sa imong self kay if mas spread na your life will be in danger. If Filipino ka, bisan ikaw sakto o gasulti sa tinuod, i-invalidate jud na nila imong statements. Burgos, Gomez, Zamora, and Zaldua were condemned by an unanimous vote to the penalty of death by Garuti Vic in accordance with Article 1 of the Law of April 17, 1821, their being accomplices in the said crimes having been fully proved. Garuti-ville is a weapon, usually a hand-held ligature of chain, rope, scarf, soldiers as a silent means of killing sentries and other enemy. Garuti ang Gomborza Fathers because of the accusations na sila'y galid o gaplan sa mutiny. Sila maoyrut daw nganong nahitabo ang Cavite Mutiny adtong 1872. The sentence provided a copy before the Archbishop for the degradation of the ecclesiastics Don Jose Burgos, Don Jacinto Zamora, and Don Mariano Gomez, calling attention to the fact that in case of necessity, the sentence be carried out in accordance with the prescriptions of the Royal Order of October 17, 1835. This law was limited to the enunciation of cases to be drawn up, and it can thus be said the tribunal a prioristically reached a judgment that no pardon was possible for the priests overlooking izquierdos in default of the other previous cases.
Spanish account of the Cavite Mutiny. The documentation of a Spanish historian, Jose Montero Vidal, centered on how the event was attempt in overthrowing the Spanish government in the Philippines. His account corroborated with the account of Governor General Rafael Izquierdo Gutierrez, the Governor General of the Philippine Islands during the mutiny. In particular, Izquierdo blamed the underlay Spanish press for stockpiling malicious propagandas grabbed by the Filipinos. He reported to the King of Spain that the rebels wanted to overthrow the Spanish government to install a new hari in the likes of Fathers Burgos and Zamora. He insisted that the mutiny is stimulated and prepared by the native clergy, mestizos, and lawyers as a signal of objection against the injustice of the government, such as not paying provinces for tobacco crops, pay tribute, and rendering of forced labor. The general even added that the native clergy enticed other participants by giving them charismatic assurance that their fight will not fail because God is with them, coupled by handsome promises of rewards such as employment, wealth, and ranks in the army. Essentially, both Mariano and Izquierdo scored out that the obligation of privileges enjoyed by the workers of Cavite, arsenal such as non-payment of tributes and exemption from forced labor were the main reasons of the revolution, as how they called it. However, other causes were enumerated by them, including the Spanish Revolution, which overthrew the secular throne, dirty propagandas, proliferated by unrestrained press, democratic, liberal, and republican books and pamphlets reaching of the Philippines, and most importantly, the presence of the native clergy, who out of animosity against the Spanish peers, conspired and supported the rebels and enemies of Spain. The two Spaniards claimed that the event of 1872 was planned earlier and was thought of it as a big conspiracy among educated leaders, mestizos, abogadillos, or native lawyers resident of Manila and Cavite, and native clergy. So let's proceed to the Filipino accounts of Cavite Mutiny. So Ferdinand La Madrid was a mestizo sergeant who led the mutiny after Spanish authorities subjected his co-soldiers at the engineering and artillery corps to personal taxes from which they had previously been exempted. Taxes obliged them to pay a monetary sum and due to the pulo servicio or forced labor.
So, good day everyone. I will continue discussing about the Filipino accounts of Cavite Mutiny. So, Dr. Trinidad Hermenegildo Pardo de Tavera, a Filipino scholar and researcher, wrote the Filipino version of the bloody incident in Cavite. In his point of view, the incident was a merry mutiny by native Filipino soldiers and laborers of the Cavite arsenal who turned out to be dissatisfied about the abolition of their privilege. Tavera blamed Gov. Izquierdo's cold-blooded policies such as the abolition of privileges of the workers and native army members of the arsenal and the prohibition of the founding of School of Arts and Trades for the Filipinos, which the general believed as a cover-up for the organization of the political club. Tavera believed that the Spanish friars and Izquierdo used the Cavite Mutiny as a powerful lever by magnifying it as a full-blown conspiracy involving not only the native army but also included residents of Cavite and Manila, and more importantly, the native clergy to overthrow the Spanish government in the Philippines. Next is Antonio Maria Regidor y Juan. Was a lawyer, diplomat, and propagandist. Despite being a Spanish parentage, Regidor supported the secularization movement and the nationalist propaganda. Next Filipino account is the French writer Edmond Plautchut's account, complemented Tavera's account by confirming that the event happened due to the discontentment of the arsenal workers and soldiers in Cavite Fort. The Frenchman, however, dwelt more on the execution of the 3 martyr priests which he actually witnessed. So, si Edmond, dito siya ga-focus sa pagkamatay sa mga priest kay nakakita man siya sa pagkahitabo. A History of the Philippines by Renato Constantino. 19th century, Creoles, mestizos, or natives. Philippinization implies the fight began as an attempt by Españoles Filipinos to assist themselves vis-a-vis the Peninsular Friars. The Cavite Mutiny of 1872 marked the beginning of a new stage in the escalating unrest, although the mutiny was suppressed in less than a day. The Spaniards under Rafael D. Izquierdo proclaimed it part of a underspread separatist conspiracy. Priest Jose Burgos, Mariano Gomez, and Jacinto Zamora were accused of being part of a conspiracy against the Catholic Church in the Philippines. Many other prominent persons were arrested and sentenced to long prison terms or banishment. All 3 protested their innocence to the end. So, si Jose Burgos, Mariano Gomez, o si Jacinto Zamora, gi-fight nila ang ilang pagka-inosente pero wala gyapon sila gituuhan. Against the Peninsulars. The repression that followed the Cavite Mutiny made the 3 racial groups, Creoles, mestizos, and natives, join hands and become conscious of their growing development as a Filipino nation. 1892 marks a new stage in the growing consciousness of a separate national identity. Fighting the friars as Spaniards. Philippinization, a nationalist movement and policy of local control in the Philippines, a policy of embracing native Philippine culture and control. So, Philippine Revolution was shaped by a series of events that lead to the emergence of a nation with rising expectation and common grievances. The interaction between liberal ideas from the continent and the rising classes and experience of the masses contributed to the country's emergence as a modern nation. Setting the stage, revolution and nationhood, the new Filipinos and the reform movement. The articulators were the sons of families that had benefited from the economic development of the Philippines. They were able to take advantage of educational opportunities that our liberalized Spanish colonial policy offered. In less than a generation, these articulators became the early spokesmen for the people's grievances and aspirations. Filipinos were beginning to develop a loyalty to the Philippines as a distinct entity, The term Filipino was growing in scope, although its application was still limited by property, education, and Spanish culture.
My name is Maglister J. Hara, and my groupmates assigned me to report this. Gumburza. They were prominent Filipino priests charged with treason and sedition. The Spanish clergy connected the priests to Mutiny as part of a conspiracy to stifle the movement of secular priests who desired to have their own parishes instead of being assistants to the regular friars. Mga membro ng Gumburza ay sina Mariano Gomez, Jose Burgos at Jacinto Zamora. In Bagumbayan, Philippines by Spanish colonial authorities on charges of subversion arising from 1872 Cavite Mutiny. On February 1872 was the one of the price executed due the false occasion of treason and sedition, taking a supposed active role in Cavite Mutiny. The first member is Father Mariano Gomez, born on August 2, 1979, an old man in his mid-70s, Chinese Filipino born on Cavite. He held most senior position of 3 as Archbishop's Vicar in Cavite. He was truly nationalistic and accepted the death penalty from as to it were his penance for being pro-Filipinos. And si Mariano Gomez ay isa sa membro ng Gumburza. Isa sa nagtatag ng Gumburza at napakalaking ambag niya sa Cavite Mutiny. And Father Mariano Gomez died on February 17, 1872 in Manila. Next is Father Jose Apolonio Burgos. Pangalawa sa membro ng Gumburza. Was born on February 9, 1837. Spanish descent, born in the Philippines. He was parish priest of the Manila Cathedral and had been known to be close to the Liberal Governor General de la Torre. He was 34 years old at that time. He was active and spoken in advocating in the Filipinos of the clergy. Isa si Father Jose Apolonio Burgos ang tumatag bilang membro ng Gumburza at pinatay siya noong 1872 in Manila. Next is Father Jacinto Zamora, born on August 14, 1835. He also at 30 years old was also Spanish, born on the Philippines. He was the parish priest of Marikina and was known to be unfriendly to and would not countenance the arrogance of alternative behavior from Spaniards from Spain. Burgos' death in convincing many Filipinos that Spanish rule was an intolerable evil. And he died also in February 17, 1872. So ang sabay-sabay pala silang pinatay sa kanilang grupo na Gumburza. Relevance to history. Many believe that Cavite Mutiny was a beginning of Filipino nationalism that would eventually lead to the Philippines Revolution of 1966. Thank you.